guys, welcome to System Breakdowns, and today we're talking about the Sugar Show, Sean O'Malley. Came off of this tremendous win that he just put on a seminar against Chris Matino. Really a dynamic fighter. He utilizes a couple principles very well, particularly a feinting system used in conjunction with the pattern principle, used in conjunction with slide in, slide out countering and stuff like that. We're going to talk about all this today. Very important stuff. Really plays to his strengths. You know, he's a brown belt in jiu-jitsu. He's also got this tremendously long reach that he uses to his advantage. And he's super tough. He breaks his fight against Andre Muffathuth or whatever this guy's name is. Breaks his foot in the middle of the fight and then continues to fight, hopping on one foot, doing butterfly sweeps with it. Very tough kid. And I'm really excited to see where he goes. I think most people are looking at him and seeing in the next year and a half to 2 years, he's probably going to be the next 135-pound champ. Very exciting. So that being said, stay tuned, and we're going to start with defense and talk about the systems that he uses that allows him to be successful and how you can implement this into your own game. Okay, for the first thing I want to get into is talking about defense and range control. Very important. Defense is the cornerstone of any system, in my opinion. But he needs range control to make that possible. And ideally, really what you're going to talk about is two different styles of defense for him. And it's really based on how much room he has to move. Ideally, he likes to have room to back up and keep moving back. So he does a lot of forward walking him down and just to getting into range and striking. And then he gets back out of range. And what he does is he uses this to also lure them. And we'll talk about that in countering. But in terms of his ability to defend himself, what he wants to be able to do is back up and get his head out of range. He'll use this a lot of times in conjunction with a catch parry, and sometimes he'll frame out with his long front arm to keep him at bay as well. And he'll do stuff like this where keep him, at bay here so that they can't press forward, part of his range control. And then he'll throw his head back and he'll throw out this catch parry a lot of times as he backs out of range and resets. That is when he has the space to move. When he gets backed up a lot, like I said, he's using his front hand sometimes for range control, but he's also going to use things like he's going to use top position principle where he's going to try to get on top of them a lot if he runs out of space and he gets backed up to the cage. He also does a lot of front kicks as range control, where you'll see him do this frequently as he gets backed up. He'll frequently throw the front kick to keep them from pressing too quickly. What he will do is when he gets backed up, like I said, he uses the top position principle, but he also will start to do more roll unders from here. As he gets backed up and he runs out of space, you'll see him roll under, pop out a corner, and reset. Very common strategy where he does a lot of head movement, roll out, and then reset. That is what gets him out of tight positions, but mostly he's trying to keep himself from getting there. So he's going to throw countering, he's going to get back, he's going to throw his front kick, he's going to frame, he's going to use his top hands and stuff like that. All that together works really well to help him defend. A couple things I want to also touch on is that one is he does a lot of stance switching. Part of this is from a defensive strategy, so it's harder for them to figure out how to line up their shots with them. But it's also a leg kicking strategy, and he's talked about this before, where guys going for his legs a lot, he knows this, so when he switches up his stance a lot, it makes it harder for them to figure out where his feet are going to be, so it's harder for them to leg kick. When they do try to kick his legs, you see a lot of this generally, very similar to what you see out of like a Wonder Boy, where instead of checking kicks, he slides the foot out. And because he has such dynamic movement, it's very easy for him to do this because he uses a lot of that ball of the foot movement here where he's getting back out of range and as kicks come he can always do this or switch a stance and step back out of it, stuff like that. So that works for the majority of his defense and his range control. But the other thing I want to talk about is that one of the things that keeps them from entering in too quickly are psychological. And this is a really important thing to understand. When guys are moving in, his constant feinting is another reason why guys are afraid to move in a lot, because he's constantly in a feinting situation. So as guys start to press forward, they're seeing this feint and they're going, it's kind of stopping their motion because they feel like something's coming and they're getting ready to defend, and it gives him time to move out. And when you're already employing a lot of active feinting, when you're already doing this stuff a lot and guys are starting to back you up and you're doing this quick motion is going to give you more time because their response is going to be slower and it's going to give you time to move. That works really well. The other thing that I want to say is that he kind of instills this fear of countering in people, and with good reason. he lands a lot of counter shots. And when we talk about countering, you'll understand why, but that countering gives people a moment of pause before they enter. And when they start trying to back them down, it can be very challenging because, one, he's throwing feints already, and two, you're kind of worried about getting caught as you enter in. So you got to approach very carefully. And sometimes this will slow guys down and give him more time to throw his game and get back out, come back in, and get back out. This kind of a principle, use of the slide in, slide out principle we're going to talk about shortly, works really, really well. And it makes it hard for guys to get in because in addition to his footwork already being dynamic and having a good countering game, with guys being afraid of the countering game and him throwing feints, it gives them a moment of pause, so it gives him more room to move back. And then when they do, he uses his front kicks, he uses his top hands and his framing, and then he can roll out. It works really, really well. And this is why he doesn't get caught a ton, because he doesn't linger in the danger zone. So that's going to do it for the defense and countering. So stay tuned, and we're going to keep going with this. Okay, now let's get into the fun stuff, which is the offensive stuff. And most importantly, this next section is going to be about feinting. And he is fantastic with feinting. I think next to Izzy, he probably has the best feinting in the UFC, and it's part of why he's so successful. I think he and Izzy are like head-to-head with their ability to use feints to set up offensive techniques. And he's very, very good at using it active. Now, the feinting principle is basically the idea that I'm going to keep your senses on overload by giving you false flags constantly, so you never know what's the real thing. And he uses this in conjunction with what I call the pattern principles, where you set and break patterns. He will set it, and then he'll set it again, and then he'll break it, okay? So he'll set a pattern, and then he'll break the pattern. He does this a lot. He is very good at this. So he'll feint the roundhouse, cross. He'll feint the cross, roundhouse kick. And he does this a lot. We're setting and breaking patterns. So the pattern principle is very important when you look at his striking, because he does a lot of attacking twice, switching up on the third. Very, very useful tactic, and he does it very, very well. And he's constantly employing it. Now, feinting, he does a lot of different types of feints. Some of the most notable ones, you'll see him do the foot stomp a lot. This one here works really well. He uses it very similar to what Yair Rodriguez does. If you watch my last system breakdown, I talk about how Yair Rodriguez does stomp. And what he does is, on the foot stomps, the first time he does it, they back away. The second time they do it, they go like this. The third time, they ignore it. And that's when he moves in, and he goes here, pop, right into it. And Sugar Sean does something very similar. He stomps, and he causes them to back away. He stomps, and they react a little bit. And then he stomps, and he attacks. And what happens is, by the third one, they're ignoring it. And see what I'm talking about with setting and breaking patterns? Very, very useful strategy. So the foot stomp is one of his attacks or feints that he'll do. Other things that he'll do a lot of is a lot of head feints. He likes head feinting a lot. A lot of this type of stuff. Part of the reason he does this, and we're going to talk about this when we talk about luring guys in for counters in a little bit, he uses this to draw them in. If you look at Izzy, how Izzy fights, he does a lot of this. I call it the chicken walk. You lean with your head forward, and he's trying to draw out punches to allow him to slide back and counter. We'll talk about that, like I said, later. But he will do a lot of that. He'll do a lot of leaning his head off the side to feint stuff, like he's going to feint the cross. He'll feint the shoulder. He does a look away feint a lot, where he goes like this. And what he's doing is he's using it to set up a back kick. So what he'll do is, and this is where he starts getting in guys' heads, and this is what's fun. He'll look away, cross. But then sometimes he'll do stuff like he'll look away, and he'll actually throw the turning back kick. And this is how he catches guys, because they think it's not coming, because the last time he did this feint setup, he didn't throw it. He went here, and then he threw a punch, right? This time he does it, and he feints, and they go, oh, I know what he's doing. And then he feints, and he actually throws the turning back kick, and he catches guys with it. It's very, very smart. Other things he'll do, one of his best feints that he does is the feint uppercut. If you look at the Eddie Wineland fight, he feints the uppercut, and he's done this significantly a couple times, where he feints, and he comes through to this cross. And he's so good at throwing it that guys ignore it. They think he's just coming up here, and it's not that they're reacting to the uppercut and dropping their hands. They just think that he's feinting, and they think that he's just playing around, and he goes, pop! And he puts his whole body into it, and he lands clean on guys. He's had some very nasty times where he's dropped guys to the ground using this, where he makes them think that he's not really throwing because he's just feinting. And he comes in here, and what happens is when he gets to here, he's already halfway into his punch. So by the time guys realize they're getting punched in the face, it's already too late. And it's not that they're like I said, it's not that they're responding to the uppercut and dropping their hands. They're just not responding to it because they're ignoring it. Because it's a very, very smart tactic, and he has landed this a bunch. Very, very devastating, because when he comes through, he knows they're going to ignore it, and he puts his whole body behind it, and that's when guys drop. Very, very effective feint. So that is the majority of his feints. You will see this employed a lot. Like I said, defensively, he'll do this because as he's in here and guys start pressing him back, he feints, right? Right? And every time he does this, guys stop. And he's even talked about his feinting is very subtle movements. He's like, I don't have to do a big movement. All I have to do is here. I just need him to react, because he knows these are high-level fighters. When you have a lower-level fighter, your feints have to be a little bit bigger, right? You have to really feint with bigger motions for them to respond to it. When you have high-level fighters like this, they respond to stuff a lot more because they're more tuned into it. So when you throw a little thing, they're more prone to react or not react. And when they don't react, he can catch them. So that is for the first part of the feinting. We're going to stay tuned. We'll talk about feinting more as it applies to other areas. But that is generally his feinting principle. And like I said, it's all about overloading their senses and setting and breaking patterns. All right, guys, so now let's talk about offense. So there's a couple things I want to point out that are really important on this. First thing I want to talk about is his ability to use range really well, and how he shifts his guard depending on his range. So this is important here. So what he does is this. From the outside, he wants to maximize his ability to hit them so that they can't hit him back. So he does two things. One is, as he punches, he rotates his shoulder forward. So instead of punching here, he punches here because he wants to get that extra couple inches. He's already got a longer reach on guys by a couple inches, sometimes 3 or 4 inches, and so he adds another couple inches to his punch by rotating. The other thing he does is this kind of Tony Ferguson thing, where Tony Ferguson will stand here and he'll lean way forward into his punch, and it almost looks like he's like bending over to do it. And Sean O'Malley does this a little bit too, where he knows that he wants to get a little bit more, so in order to hit him from further away, he's going to kind of lean forward into it a little bit, and he's going to simultaneously rotate his shoulder forward. And you see how what this does is it gives him the ability to hit here. While this guy's punching here, he's punching way out here. When you add the already naturally longer reach, it means that this guy's only coming up to about here on him, while he's catching here and then coming back out. What this does then is it gives him the ability to fight from close in and not take as much damage. This is part of why he leans in here to draw punches for counters. We'll talk about that in a second. But a lot of times his hands are down for the same reason that Izzy does it, so that it's harder to telegraph and figure out what's coming next, especially when you're actively feinting. You're not sure what punch is coming at any point. When he does get closer to range, his hands come up. So he kind of decides, from further out, I'm going to do a less telegraph punch where it's harder to read. From closer in, if I can't maintain that range, my hands are going to come up to defend a little bit more because it's more concerned about defense at that point. Very, very smart tactic. Other things I want to point out is his ability to set and break patterns like I talked about. I'm going to give an example of this. So his most common attacks are going to be jabbing and crossing to the head, roundhouse kicks to the body, roundhouse kicks to the head, roundhouse kicks to the leg, chopping away at the leg. He's got a good leg kick. He uses it only sporadically. He doesn't overuse it. He uses it just to mix things up. Same thing with like his turning back kick and some of his other stuff. He's using it mostly to mix things up. The front kick, he's mostly using to keep him at bay. But a lot of times from the outside, he likes to throw the roundhouse kick, particularly from an open stance. And this is where setting and breaking patterns is really great. I can't remember who he did it to, but there was a fight where he threw like 6 in a row. And he threw it, body kick, feinting, body kick, feinting. Well, he just threw 2 body kicks, so he just set the pattern twice. Now he's going to break it and come up to the head kick. And then he's going to get back out, right? He's evading. And then now he goes down, high. So now he goes back to the body. Then they start catching on to that. Pop! And he goes to the leg. Then he comes back here, back to the head. And when they start catching on all these roundhouse kicks, then he comes in, pop! Back out. it makes him very tough to deal with when he's feinting, getting out a lot, that it's hard for them to keep track of what's going on. So he's always a step ahead of them. And when you have a fast-paced fight and a guy who already throws pretty quickly, this can be a major challenge to deal with. Somebody who's moving quickly, feinting a lot, and setting and breaking a lot of patterns, and he does it in timing, he does it in elevation, he does it in direction. Very, very good use of the pattern principle. So that's something that's very important to pay attention to in his fights. How often he sets things. He does it in his feinting too. Set, 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 pop. He mixes it up, and then he feints the jab. Pop. Pop. Right? He does 2 feints, and then he goes somewhere else. Or he does 2 feints, and he does that. So you're never sure if it's happening or not. And it keeps him constantly going, oh shit, and on system overload, and it's hard for them to keep up with. So then they start pressuring him forward, he catches it with front kicks, and it gives him his countering opportunities. We'll talk about that next. Last thing I'll talk about in this section is use of the turning wheel kick. I want to point it out as an example of what to do. Now the best use of the turning wheel kick is reactive as they're coming in as a counter, but the second best use is similar to what Yair Rodriguez does, where he uses rounded techniques as they're backing up. So in this case, he uses a front kick to back him up. And then once they get backed up, he throws his turning wheel kick. He also uses this because he knows that if he can back a guy up to the cage, it's a deterrent for them to run away. He wants them to get stuck there so he can pick him apart with that mobile sniper, right? So what he does is, he knows most guys, when they're trying to escape off the back of the cage, they cut out to the right because an orthodox fighter, the weak side is this direction, and most guys are just accustomed to doing it. So when he backs a guy up, he throws the wheel kick to this side to keep them from escaping out and to keep them pinned in. Okay? That's going to do it for offense. Stay tuned for the next section on countering. Okay guys, so the next section I want to talk about countering. Probably his biggest strong suit. He's very good at setting this up. And a lot of it he does predominantly based on what I call the slide in, slide out principle. And I've used this a bunch in my own sparring. I have videos where I talk about this, where essentially I'm going to come in, I'm going to throw a shot, and I'm going to back up. And as you start to back up, I catch you. Very, very common tactic that if you get good at, you can do a lot with. And he is very good at this. Especially being a mobile sniper where he's already in and out a lot. And then he backs up, and his guys come in, pop! He catches them. And you see how he leans back and he throws his long reach punch over the shoulder. So as they're coming in with their lead hand, he comes over that shoulder and catches them. And he loves to do this. If they come with the cross, he'll come in with the backhand. And he'll throw this over their shoulder. As the punch is here, he throws it over their shoulder, keeps his head back, and he connects clean on them. He is very good at landing this. He will also back up and jab as well. But his favorite is coming over that shoulder with a hook or a cross, so that as it comes in, like so. That is based off the slide in, slide out principle, where essentially I come in, and then I wait, and then as I start to back up, if you don't do anything, I'm going to come back in and do it again. Otherwise, if you start to press forward, I'm waiting for it, and I'm ready to come over your hands with my own. Very, very good use of this technique. Other things that are important to note, he does a lot of feinting to draw them in as well. So in addition to coming in, throwing his bomb and getting back out, we talked about how he does the, what I call the chicken walk, what Israel Adesanya does, leaning in with his head. He does this because he knows that by leaning in, he has all this range to lean back and come over the top. And being longer works to his advantage. So he's going to come in here, feint, he chicken walks in, keeps his head forward, and he waits for them to draw in and punch, and he leans back, and he catches them. It is a very, very tough thing to deal with when you get a guy who's good at throwing counter punches like that. So that is the majority of his countering game. It's not super complex, but what it is super effective. And it's very tough to deal with. And he knows how to time stuff so that as guys come in, he can catch them and continue to back up. And this is what he just did in his last fight, where as he got pressured forward, he just kept coming in and catching him. Every time he started to run him down, he would front kick him to back him off, and then he would catch him with these punches. And if the guy came to punch, bam. And that's what he basically did to Moreno. He just came in and just continued to draw him in and catch him over the shoulder. That's his countering game. It's not super complex. It does take practice, but he is excellent at it. And when you use this in conjunction with his mobile sniper type tactics, his longer reach and stuff like that, it is very difficult to contend with. And that's why I said it's predominantly his system is based on setting and breaking patterns, a good countering system with the slide in, slide out, and a feinting system. Those three things are really what he wins on. Alrighty, for the last part, let's talk about a little bit of jiu-jitsu and takedown defense. This guy has some really phenomenal jiu-jitsu, so it does help. I always believe you can't be free to be a good striker unless you have a good ground game or a good takedown defense. You just aren't free to do so. Israel Adesanya has very good takedown defense, and he's proved he's really increased his jiu-jitsu game as well, and his ability to get back to his feet, as he showcased against Marvin Vettori. Other guys who are great at this, Anderson Silva had a great jiu-jitsu game and made him free to strike. If you are going to be good as a striker, you have to be good on the ground. This is where Conor McGregor kind of fell apart, is people started realizing they could beat him on the ground, and it made him less free to strike. So, the thing is, when you look at Sugar Sean, this guy is phenomenal on the ground. Now, in terms of pure takedown defense, usually where he runs into it, he doesn't have guys shoot on him a lot, but when he does, he mostly just frames out like so. Sometimes he'll throw a kick and guys will catch his foot. He'll do the same thing. He frames, he'll put a hand on the hip, and he'll just get his foot free and back up. He's very difficult to take down. If you do take him down, it's not necessarily a good thing. I think guys have caught on. He's a scary guy on the ground. He's probably one of the best jiu-jitsu guys in that division. Maybe the best. He's done quintets and had some pretty nice victories in quintets, again, against world-class jiu-jitsu guys. But in general, he is very good at using his jiu-jitsu. Now, he's done things like pulled guard to a triangle and stuff like that. On the bottom, what you can expect a lot is if he gets to a guard, you're going to see a lot of triangles, you're going to see a lot of guillotines, and you're going to see a lot of arm bars. And he kind of does the triangle arm bar back and forth a bunch, and then he'll also go for guillotines as they present themselves. If you do happen to get him on the bottom, and this has happened to him before where he's ended up on bottom side, he's fine. He has a very good guard recovery. And essentially what he's going to do is he's going to go from side control, he's going to swim his feet under, recover to half guard. Once he gets to half guard, it's all easy for him. Then it's just a matter he gets the closed guard, he gets the butterfly hooks back in, and he's set. He mostly seems to prefer a butterfly guard because he can use his long legs to push them back, hit guillotines and stuff like that. Or push them back and get back to his feet. A lot of guys who have a good jiu-jitsu game, they seem to want to try to keep the fight standing. He is not that guy. He is totally content to have that fight be wherever you want to put it. If you want it on the ground, works for him. He will tangle you up and tear you up on the ground. If he does get to a top position, he doesn't do a lot of top position on the ground. He mostly likes to pull different guards. But from a top position, he has gone knee on belly, slid it forward into a mount, and just ground and pounded against the cage. You see that less frequently than him doing things, like I said, pulling guard into a triangle and threatening some very serious things from the bottom. But really, he makes his money striking. That's what he likes to do. He's devastating on the ground, but he is worse up top. He likes those knockouts. He likes the feeling of putting out somebody cold. I think the only exception where he really wanted that fight to be on the bottom was the Andrei Silvathos guy. I can never remember his name. But he wanted that because he broke his foot. And so it was easier for him to work off the ground as opposed to hop along Cassidy. But that's really it for him. Man, the guy is really, really effective. Like I said, his strategy is basically a combination of excellent feinting, slide in, slide out for the countering, and setting and breaking patterns. And he does it well. Getting in and out of range and range control is a big part of it. And he can just kind of pick guys apart. So, like I said, this is the guy that I'm expecting that within a year or two, he's going to be the 135-pound champ. I give it 2 years tops. So I hope you enjoyed this system breakdown and all the things that you can pull from it to put in your game. As always, throw your comments below. I love talking about this stuff. So please, throw comments below and let me know how it works out for you.